Okay, so I'm going to hand over this panel to its moderator, Omar Kennedy from AnimeKon. Those of you who are familiar with AnimeKon knows that he's very busy right about now. So we're very grateful that he was able to join us and moderate this panel. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Omar Kennedy, and as Ashel said, I am the Executive Director of AnimeKon, the Eastern Caribbean's largest and best pop culture convention. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. It is indeed an honor to moderate this morning's panel, The Internet, a Platform for Economic Growth. Now, when the chair of the IGF, Ashel Ford, asked me to moderate her panel on the internet and economic growth, I jumped on it immediately. But the moment I had put down the phone, I thought she had punked me. Why would Ashel ask the least tech-savvy person that she knew to embarrass himself moderating a panel of heavy hitters in front of the technocrats of Barbados? But on thinking about it, I realized that I am not here because of my skill in front of a keyboard. I was asked here because I am a dreamer. As an aside, to prove my point, I actually have my speech in my pocket just in case this iPad fails. But anyways, I have an unusual distinction of binding the worlds of business and art. As an ex-banker, economist, and financier of some repute, my calling actually tended more towards the art and creatives, and one of my main foci was the unemployment and the underdevelopment within the creative economy of Barbados. When Melissa Young and I created AnimeKon, which coincidentally, and this is a shameless plug, is on August the 16th to the 19th at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center, we envisioned creating a platform for geeks and nerds to be able to create, develop, and export their creative products and intellectual property. This, in effect, brings foreign exchange into Barbados, reduces unemployment and underemployment, and creates a competitive industry which isn't dependent on manufacturing. We are happy to say that through the power and utilization of the net, we have created platforms in which we have become the official pop culture hub of the region and have brought hundreds of regional and international exhibitors and visitors to Barbados. We have helped to develop many small companies through international networks, propelling them from mom-and-pop basement businesses to importer, exporters, and creator of exportable intellectual properties. We have created networks where initiatives liaise from as far as Japan, and new exhibitors can now export things such as locally created video games, animation, and digital media. Needless to say, with the internet, our creatives no longer need to live in the same city or country as their employers. Now all they need is a computer, an internet connection, a PayPal account, and a comfy place to sit. A recent study that was sent to me yesterday, via the internet of course, said that most salaried workers do only about 3 hours of real work each day. From my own experience, running multiple businesses from the comfort of my own home, I can attest that my productivity has never been higher. Companies which allow employees to work from home have not only seen increased productivity, but have happier staff. Most importantly to business is that it lowers overall costs and helps to increase the almighty bottom line. Now, if we could only do something to use it at its full potential outside of sending emails, researching the Kardashians, and watching those all too addictive cat videos. Today I have the distinct honor of discussing economic growth, a favorite topic of mine, with the following guests. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our panelists. Mr. Russell Franklyn is the Operations and Financial Controller at the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility since May 1st, 2017. A certified public accountant and project management professional, Russell has ample experience in the field of development in the Caribbean, having previously worked for several CARICOM and regional development institutions. He has designed and executed numerous technical and innovation projects with high stakeholder complexity to support the improvement of competitiveness within the region, including the technology extension services. Roger Hennis is... Oh, sorry about that. Roger Hennis is a senior manager in consulting within the Deloitte Barbados office, and also leads this regional center of excellence for digital. Roger has been with Deloitte for 4 years, with a total of over 28 years of business development with leading ICT firms. He has gained valuable experience working with various industry sectors, including government, financial services, and retail and distribution. His focus areas include strategic planning, digital strategy, transformation, technology strategy, cybersecurity, innovation, and analytics, and he works closely with clients, advising on ways to leverage these capabilities to deliver an enhanced customer experience and business growth. Outside of work, he is passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and startups. He is a mentor with the Branson Center for Entrepreneurship Caribbean. He is also a member of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Committee, Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and sits on the Board of Trustees for the World Economic Forum Global Shapers Bridgetown Hub. The final panelist, Selwyn Cambridge, he is the founder and executive director of 10 Habitat, a non-profit organization based in Barbados, which focuses on developing investor-ready firms and engaging the Caribbean diaspora to co-invest into them. With a strong focus on developing global communities around Caribbean entrepreneurs, Selwyn also founded the Caribbean Startup Summit, an annual event which connects a global startup community with regional entrepreneurs to share experiences and insights into starting and scaling ventures. Selwyn is also a marketing and brand strategist by profession and has almost 2 decades of regional and international experience in the communications and marketing industry. His brand development work has been featured on several international campaigns in Europe, Canada, the United States, South Africa, and across the Caribbean. His take on developing brand identities has also been immortalized on the Guyanese $5 coin, which he designed and is credited with multiple American Advertising Federation awards. Selwyn's commitment to regional business growth and his work with development institutions led him to design and develop the London Engage initiative for Caribbean Export Development Agency. Staged in London during the 2012 Olympic Games, the project sought to open up opportunities for regional entrepreneurs and position the Caribbean as an emerging marketplace for foreign direct investment, all with an aim to take better advantage of the opportunities presented by the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe. Selwyn's passion for developing and driving initiatives to provide support to the startup community is also evidenced in the creation of the Caribbean's first hybrid accelerator, which he launched along with a co-working facility and innovation hub in Barbados under 10 Habitat. This initiative has received funding support from the IADB under the Multilateral Investment Fund and has global program partners, which help to provide capacity and other support to startups in the Caribbean. Now, we are now going to start entertaining questions from the audience, but before we do, I'd like to ask the first question to the panel. Is it a pipe dream to have a Silicon Valley in Barbados, a microcity focused on tech, innovation, and technical advancements? What would it take to create such a place? Do we need it? And if not, what do we need?
Sorry, I just had to jump at that one. I'm Selwyn. The challenge that I often have is when persons within the Caribbean often attempt to talk about Silicon Valley. We don't need to be creating a Silicon Valley in the Caribbean or in Barbados for that matter. We need to be creating something that's relevant to the region, that reflects what the region needs and the nuances that exist within the Caribbean. So it may look like a Silicon Valley, but it may not. What we should be doing is focusing on where the areas of opportunities are and measuring and matching that with the capacity that exists within the region. And where there's a lack, then we reach out. It's one of the reasons why we focused heavily on building a global community around startups within the Caribbean. Because if we want to compete globally, we have to have global expertise and import global best practices. So it's not really a situation of a Silicon Valley in the region, but it's more so a Caribbean ecosystem, a startup ecosystem that drives the economic development of the region in areas that we specialize in, and it may not look at all like the Silicon Valley.
Just to add, a Compete Caribbean is implemented by the IADB, so of course I know Selwyn very closely as well. But what we look at in terms of a version of a Silicon Valley, IADB and a Compete Caribbean is putting the right, as he said, ecosystem or the right environment in place. And the reason I say this is because we've done this already at the IDB. So there's places like Chile and Colombia where we've helped to develop hubs where there isn't Silicon Valley per se, but it is something of the equivalent. And the business environment was what was critical. So we did things like incentives in terms of bringing, not only developing the companies as startups, as Selwyn is saying, that are local, but also bringing companies from Silicon Valley and giving them a reason to start businesses in this case, Chile and Colombia. And then you get what you call that technological transfer, where then the startups in the region gain that knowledge from these experienced companies coming from the same Silicon Valley, coming from London, coming from Canada. And in that mix, it evolves the ecosystem where then we can develop something in the region of similar ilk. And I think that is where we need to go as well too, in terms of looking at how do we bring about the enabling environment, not only to develop locally, but also bringing the requisite knowledge that's needed.
Yeah, just to add to that. So out of respect, I will more so say I'm a mentor with 10 Habitat, which he left out because he probably will be upset with it. So many years ago, Selwyn and I actually know each other quite well because many years ago, I had the same passion as him which is what we're here discussing. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in Barbados and in the Caribbean region, and what we don't have is an ecosystem that supports entrepreneurs. And if anyone in the room is an entrepreneur, they'll know that, right? Everybody wants to do something, and you have great ideas, but you don't know where to go. And if you were in, and you say to yourself, if I was in the US, everything is there. The venture capitalists, their startups, the accelerators, everything. So it isn't the lack of will; it's the opportunity is there, and it's the country. And let's not just focus on Silicon Valley. That's in California. I mean, you got Boston, you got New York, and stuff like that. But they are ecosystems because they become an advanced society around entrepreneurial ecosystems. So our thing was seeing entrepreneurs struggling to be able to move forward. And what they were doing was they were going to the same development agencies. We have 4 here, I think, right? Like Yes and BYBT and stuff like that. But what they weren't getting was a cohesive end-to-end support system. So I think the thing with 10 was to really focus on how do you provide an entire ecosystem, not just funding, not just mentorship and everything, that supports entrepreneurs. That being said, the specific answer to the question around Silicon Valley. Does anyone know why Silicon Valley is called Silicon Valley? Silicon. The main thing was silicon. You went back to Fairchild Semiconductors, which started it. So the point I stressed with that was they became Silicon Valley based around something that was relevant to the companies that started Silicon Valley, which was silicon, right? So that is what Selwyn and Russell's points are. We don't do silicon, we don't do transistors, we don't do motherboards, right? And our core is not going to be in that area and build from there. So they became very tech-oriented because of Fairchild Semiconductors and Intel, and all those companies came out of that. And when it started, it wasn't called Silicon Valley. It had some other name, whatever the real name was. It actually dubbed Silicon Valley. But I'm saying that to say, so I am like Selwyn against trying to create a Silicon Valley here because we don't do silicon, right? But what Barbados or the Caribbean is strong for we should build out an ecosystem that supports our areas of strength. And if you look at places that are more relevant, that we can more relate to, like Chile, startup Chile, which is what you spoke about, right? Chile didn't say, I'm going to create a Silicon Valley, right? Or you go to Africa, everybody knows about Africa, right? You know, the Nairobi hub and the Kenyan hub. What they look at is, what is the strength of that area? And if you look to see what they're developing, you know, I think most people know what M-Pesa in Africa, which is the digitally mobile money. But that came out of a need to be served, not because they said we want to copy Silicon Valley. But where there's a need, the need creates opportunity, and then you go to the opportunity. If we apply the same thing to Barbados or the Caribbean, what are our needs? And if our core thing is we're reliant on tourism, but there are other opportunities that we know we can develop, whether it's agriculture, whether it's, you know, whatever else it is, that is where we should use the ecosystem to help us grow that out. But we need to have an ecosystem, and then we need to really look at internet and digital technologies to give us a scale that you can't have just being here.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the floor, I think we have our first question from the internet.
Hello. This question is from Ryan Burr. His question is, was there any thoughts of utilizing the gaming potential as well within the Caribbean to bring in publicity? This arises from the multiple platforms in which enable online play from multiple areas, PUBG, mobile, PSN, and so forth. There are multiple smaller groups that have started to put in the effort into this, even within Barbados, and have multiple individuals from the Caribbean who have left us to go to bigger grounds and have at least started a name for themselves. Since the backative in this area is severely limited, or individuals don't even know how best to even start here, what would be your opinion on the advancement on this topic?
Well, I'm going to speak on the advancement of the topic. So in Compete Phase 1, we did, one of the ways we try to advance businesses and not really startups per se, is by looking at clustering. And in terms of developing a product that can be shared among a cluster. And one of the clusters we looked at in the first phase was animation. So for me, if I had to look at gaming, the first thing that I would need from Compete Caribbean's point of view would be for a cluster to be formed together, and then look at what could be a shared resource, or what does that cluster need to develop and go to the next level. As you said, there are individual firms doing individual things, and in the region, because of size and scale, for example, in animation, one of the problems was that individually the firms could not provide or supply the services that were requested from them from firms in Hollywood and these other places. So therefore, that one of the things they had to do is to come together in order to be able to supply products and services that were being requested of them. So my first thing would be to say they need to form what we call a cluster and look at what could be the shared resources in order to push that gaming cluster, if there's such a thing yet, or would be such a thing in the future, together. And then we could look at what is actually needed to get it to the next level.
I know I'm not a panelist, but I would like to add something to this. As part of AnimeKon, we have been trying to push for this for quite some time. Persons believe the gaming industry, the development industry, is quite simple, but it is not. If you look at the industry and look really deep down inside, there are so many facets which go into it. The animation is just a start. You need to have persons who understand body language, persons who know how to design clothing, persons who are architects, persons who do a lot of things, persons who are experts in voice acting, and we need to have all of these things. And we do have these things here in Barbados. We have lots of fantastic fashion designers. We have a very strong and thriving voice acting organization here in Barbados. And there are a lot of things, but as was just said, we need to all come together and realize that when we are stronger together than apart, and we can create a fantastic product going forward. When Industrial Light and Magic, they are responsible for a lot of the special effects you see in the Hollywood movies during the summers. When they came to Barbados to AnimeKon, I know I'm plugging AnimeKon a lot, but I have to. So when they came to Barbados and they saw some of the work that we were doing down here, they were so amazed that some of the work that we were putting out, some of our exhibitors were putting out, from businesses in someone's basement, when it takes them hundreds of computers, thousands of people to do these things. They said that they are so surprised that no one has gotten behind us to push us where we need to go. And I think that is the governmental push, the combination of all of our resources is what we need to go forward.
So I'm going to start to answer that question by first making a statement. What we've recognized doing 10 Habitat for a fairly short space of time was that there are two reasons entrepreneurs fail, and it's not money. The two reasons that entrepreneurs fail is, one is the inability to execute and poor access to networks. Because what you find is that entrepreneurs are idea factories. They keep coming up with a lot of ideas, but oftentimes don't have the capacity to execute on those ideas or the skill set. But they still try to do it on their own, and they fail. Now, if they had access to a well-resourced network, then they'll be able to fill capacity deficits. When you do that, and you're able to build teams around great ideas, and you execute well, money follows greatly executed ideas. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in order for you to fully build out specifically something like gaming industry, you have to start to consider the options of working together. In order for you to build anything, you first need the idea and the capacity to execute on that idea, and then you definitely need someone willing to back you. What we've found is that in more mature ecosystems, a youth will take an idea and move it from idea to market to revenue in 6 months. In the region, it takes us 6 years. It's not because that person in the US or Canada or UK is more intelligent or smarter than the person in the Caribbean. It's just access. When someone develops a fantastic idea in the region that is technologically driven, the challenge is who's going to fund him? Because where the money comes from, the investors or the potential investors are accustomed to investing in traditional industries. So they don't understand the newer industries that are developing and how to assess the risk. So they often revert back to retail, real estate, and try to assess a technological idea based on those parameters, and you can't, right? So you often face these barriers to growth that a lot of it has to be addressed at the ground floor, because you will end up with brain drain. You will end up with really talented people leaving to go to other areas where the opportunities exist for them to grow.
Just to add to what Selwyn has said, and he's very right. I think one of the things that we have to look at is how we see business, and I'll use the word business. A lot of people have ideas, and they think, I have a great idea, somebody's going to give me money, and I'm going to become the Snapchat founder. So I have an idea, I just want money, and I'm going to be a billionaire. They don't think of it as a business, is that correct? They never translate into, what I'm trying to do is to grow a business, and I have to think in a business manner. So oftentimes, I have an idea, I want to build out my idea as an individual, because I don't want other people in it. And I don't think you can't run a business with one person. So, you're not thinking as a business, that's one. Then I don't sit through and think, how do I grow this as a business? If I'm growing this as a business, I have to think like a business. What is the opportunity? Where are the gaps? What problem am I solving? Oftentimes people, I have an idea. You get where I'm going? So they're fascinated with the idea, and this idea is so unique, And let me tell you something that all y'all will relate to. Nobody else in the world has ever thought of this idea. So I'm going to keep it quiet. And my idea is unique, and I'm going to go big, and I'm going to be the next billionaire. Does that resonate with anyone? 10 other people in the world have thought of your same idea. The point is this is where it's talking about the execution. It isn't the idea, it's the execution, but treat it as a business. So when you think of a business, every big business here around the Caribbean, they're looking to see what problems am I solving. Does that make sense? If I'm solving a problem, people will buy your product or your service because you're actually serving a need. So you have to think like that. When you think of that, you have to figure out what problem am I solving and how do I solve that problem? Who are my target customers, right? And then when you do all of that, even if going back to the gaming, if you jump into the gaming industry, which when you see industries that are billion-dollar industries, and you go do the same thing that everybody else is doing, are you going to stand? Is anyone going to buy anything from you? If you do what everyone else is doing, why is someone going to come to uniquely you when 50 other people are doing the same thing? You need to have a competitive advantage. What is unique about how I'm doing it? That's different. So the point I'm making is go through a strategic thought process. Problem I'm solving, what's unique about me, then you go into things like what capabilities and infrastructure do I need to have in place, which is more than one person. If you go to most accelerators globally, you cannot enter an accelerator as an individual. They're looking for a team. There's a reason, because they know you can't do it all, right? So what infrastructure do I need to have in place? What team do I need to have in place? This is where Selwyn's point is, and I don't have to pick my best friend, which is what everyone does, to go and create this team. Or I don't have to pick my family or somebody that I like. I have to go pick someone who has the capability and skill set, and they aren't always necessarily found next to you. They may be anywhere in the world. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do around that, but think through it as a process.
Roger, your first thing answered my 2 questions, so I had to find another 2. Should write a book. Anyway, tourism. That was one of the things that I'm thinking of. We should be wrong. We should be the tourism Silicon Valley in Barbados because tourism infuses everything. We don't have a direct ministry of IT. We have a direct ministry of tourism. I think that's where we should go. The question that I now have come up with since you answered my 2. All right? Don't we have a block between the idea and the millions? Because from what I see in the States, you have the idea, okay? You may get an investor. Investors can't keep money in a business. The average business takes maybe decades to grow. How they get back their money is through growing on the stock market. We only have one unicorn in Barbados. I call it unicorn, and I call that BIT. Because they were able to get external capital one time, and those people want their money back at some point. But how you get back, the investors get back their money is born in stock market. And if we don't have an active stock market, you're talking about investors pumping $250,000 and having to wait probably for profitability and the way to pay it back, maybe 10 years. And I can't see the average investor waiting 10 years to get back a $250,000 investment, $1 billion investment. So to me, the problem that we have in Barbados is how do we get that next rung past the initial investment?
Yeah, really, really good point, Stephen. So one of the things that we're trying to do at 10 Habitat is to solve that problem. Because what Jamaica's done really well is institute a junior stock market, right? And that allows companies to provide investors with an opportunity for an exit. So they can float an IPO and then they can raise additional funding and then the investors can do a cash out. However, there are other opportunities and one of the things is focusing on scale. Because if you don't have an opportunity to raise additional funds via an IPO because you're at a startup stage, then a lot of what you've got to focus on is scaling that business quickly outside of the local jurisdiction. And that creates an opportunity. Yes, correct. That creates an opportunity for you to drive what would be a hybrid investment system where you can repay the investor through dividends on revenue generated within the business. That requires a lot of scaling though, and it requires that the business itself focuses from day one on a global market, as opposed to trying to just delve within a very small localized market. which is what the internet provides. The internet provides you with a platform to really go global quickly. Now, the challenge then you face is, particularly in Barbados, there are some huge impediments. One is e-commerce, right? And the fact that if we have a lot of entrepreneurs coming into our program that are developing businesses that are predicated on the ability to have e-commerce, and they often hit these barriers, and we're constantly working, doing workarounds to try to solve that problem. But we shouldn't be here at this stage. We should really be driving businesses and economic growth using the internet by making it easy for businesses to function on the internet and generate movement of money. And that's not very easy at all, really.
Okay, we have a question from the other side of the room.
Good morning, Liska Evanson, Evanson's Strategy. If the internet is a reflection of society, why are there no women sitting next to you, and why is there no one under 20 on your panel?
I'm not sure I can answer the 20, but I can answer the female part of it for sure. So I'm actually representing Dr. Sylvia Donner. She was actually invited, who's the executive director of Compete Caribbean. So I am actually a fill-in. So a lady would have been on the panels. She's not under 20 though, unfortunately.
And I would like to say that I hope I look young and could pass for under 20.
Albert Daniels, St. Lucia. I'm a big fan of science fiction movies. Usually at the end of the movie, for example, Star Wars and so on, I stick around until all of the credits have run, just to see the amount of individuals who have been needed to create a lot of that digital content, because a lot of it these days is not just simply filming, but a lot of it is created electronically. Last week, I went to see The Incredibles Part 2. Not because I like the cartoon, which is an okay sort of storyline and cartoon, but to see how many jobs had been created in the animation industry in that particular movie. Having recently attended an ITU meeting in the Dominican Republic where they have been talking a lot about doing local animation, it was amazing to sit through those credits to see literally the thousands of animators and other types of digital electronic skills that were necessary just to get that one movie published. So my question is, what do you see from a Barbados perspective as the path forward in terms of taking advantage of that particular opportunity that is seeming to present itself to us in the region and to our neighbors in other Caribbean territories with regard to what appears to be a new area of job creation which has the potential for serious revenue generation?
Well, okay, fine. Well, this is one of my passions as well through AnimeKon. And the main difficulty with these industries, these new industries, is that it is seen as child's play, and they're not seen as serious industries. And in Barbados, unfortunately, I have found that we tend to be very reactionary, and it is only after the Trinidadians start doing it, the Jamaicans start doing it, and everyone else starts doing it, we say, you know what, we should be doing this, and we have to do it first, when you know you cannot do it first because everyone else is doing it. I believe that we have made a good start, but there needs to be a lot of education and a lot of incentives put forward to encourage persons to do such. There is a group of young Barbadians, they all started at BCC, who are now in Canada working on animation projects. I believe they went up there through Toon Boom. I will have to confirm that, but they are doing a fantastic job in Canada right now, and I'm very, very happy, and I think it's a foot in the right direction. A lot of young persons, the young lady who scored the top marks in this year's Common Entrance, she said that she wants to be an animator. And unfortunately, in Barbados at this point in time, if you are not training to be a doctor, lawyer, or bank manager, you are seen as a second-class citizen. in terms of what you want to do. AnimeKon in itself, we have an initiative called the AnimeKon Edutainment Initiative, which aims at young school leavers and lets them know that if you do not want to be one of those three things, there is nothing wrong with going off and being a creative. And we encourage them to AnimeKon. We let them speak to our international guests who are experts from Hollywood, from wherever, and let them see that these things can give you a lot of fantastic exposure and, more importantly, a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And I think if we draw the line in the sand as to where we are now, and we're asking why isn't it happening, it's not happening based on we've done the same things over and over again, and inverted commas been successful as a country called Barbados, right? I mean, Prime Minister Gonzalez in St. Vincent a couple of years ago put out something called the idea of Barbados. Anyone heard about it? Right, and the concept was Barbados had always done well, and Barbados was the icon of the Caribbean, right? So when you have something where you're seen as the most successful country, just by doing what you've always done, but if you compare yourself to countries around the world, inverted commas, you may have regressed. Not in a bad way, but I'm saying, if you are where you are 60 years later, and Sweden, Finland, and all those other places have moved ahead, are you think? So we have a mindset which is, and I will compare it not in a bad way, to Canada. We've always been a very safe country. Canada did not get hit by the financial crisis because they're also a safe country. In the US, they take risks, right? So they take risks when financial thing crashed, US crashed. Canada didn't. But I think where we are now is a lot of it goes with the leadership, and you're actually seeing a lot of positive things being said these days around innovation by the government, by private sector, around innovation, about taking risks and doing things differently. But where I'll jump to very quickly, and the reason I'm making this comment, I go to St. Kitts often. St. Kitts has something called a technology center. Those guys are doing stuff like drone technology. You know the St. Kitts Police Force has drones that they use for surveillance? I mean, and the minister, the attorney general, is the minister in charge of ICT. When you go to the technology center, I mean, it's a small little building. I saw kids, I can't remember which college it was. I was telling someone about it. They got into robotics. And they entered a robotics team from St. Kitts. They got to the, I think, semifinals. They beat countries like Korea, Canada, and so forth with a robotics project they did. These are kids who are teenagers. They're moving on to do biotic arms now. I'm just saying, but they move past just doing what they always did to the country saying we want to do more. I'm saying I think we are at this stage where drawing a line in the sand, where I'm hearing government and private sector saying, let's not just only do tourism, let's start to look at innovation and other things. So I think you'll see a change in the mindset.
Hi, guys. So we have only a few minutes left, and we have quite a few questions, including one online. So we're going to ask both the panelists and the questions to be as short as possible so we can get in all of them, because people really want to hear your questions as well.
Okay. Hi, good morning. Kyle Albert again. Now, I had a question in terms of entrepreneurship ideas and failing. I have to disagree with that, because I don't think the entrepreneurial ideas fail because they don't treat it as a business. I think that the framework that is in place is not ready for some of the ideas we have as entrepreneurs. So just a little history, you can remember about 7 years ago or 8 years ago, a guy came to me with the idea about something like an Uber-type business, an app for the same service that Uber provide. And when we reached to research the development of this, it was looking like $200,000 or what's not. I mean, we are not ready as an economy yet. We talk about building a platform for economy growth, but who bank is going to give a person $200,000 to invest in the development of an app? We all know what happened after that. Uber was created and it was big and it made millions, but how can we get from that part, where we have the idea, and get through the roadblock that's given us financing? The banks can't only invest in businesses that they think they're going to get economic return.
So can I just, because we were just told we need to be short, I'm just going to answer you quickly, right? So first, let me be the first to take the blows and say part of the challenge within the region around entrepreneurship is that a lot of the agencies set up to develop entrepreneurs are sort of perpetuating the challenge when it comes to entrepreneurship. Many industries, many agencies are developed not to develop entrepreneurs, they're developed to produce self-employed individuals. There's a distinct difference between a self-employed individual and entrepreneur. That's the first thing. The second thing is that most entrepreneurs, most self-employed individuals, the persons who are what we like to call the accidental entrepreneur, they've lost a job or they're underemployed and they're trying to replace that job with a business on their own. They tend to look at ideas and say, okay, it's going to cost me $100,000 to do that idea. I can't do it because it's going to cost me $100,000. Actually, no, it's not. You can actually start the idea and you can do it for next to nothing and then get through an iterative process to get you to that stage. By the time you'll be able to prove the concept, you can then raise funding for it. So there's an iterative process, and building a business is a series of small tests. Once you go through those tests, you can fund any idea that you're trying to do. It doesn't require you having $100,000 up front.
Just to add though, that I take the gentleman's point, because one of the things we're trying to do at IDB and at Compete Caribbean is develop something called innovation funds. And it's basically a risk. So in the first phase, we looked at projects that were considered risky that probably banks would not fund. And we actually invested $500,000. Of course, we had to find matching funds as well too. And we took that risk on some firms. And I would say that some failed and some were unicorns to some extent, but some succeeded. And I think the environment in Barbados is partly changing now because I still need to see what would happen. But the fact that the government has developed or started something called a Ministry of Innovation. And if you look at the manifesto and they said they're going to start an innovation fund, these are things that need to be done in order to take bets on persons like or like companies that you were speaking about there just now. I can tell you for sure in the same startup, Chile, Colombia, Israel, the government of Israel puts millions of dollars into startups and into ideas. Some fail, some succeed. And the thing is to take the risk, and we have an environment of being risk averse in the Caribbean. And so then the question is the government serious and in terms of developing that ministry or starting the ministry of innovation? Are they going to put requisite amount of funds into this innovation fund that would allow to fund these type of startups and ideas?
Yes, sir.
Yes, morning, Charles Cyrus. You just mentioned the Ministry of Innovation. I'm actually part of the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology. I know that in the topic has to do with economic growth, right? And we're talking about entrepreneurship as well. And whenever the question of entrepreneurship is being raised, there's also always the thought about startups, right? There's always this focus on startups. But I also wanted to introduce another word, and I think Selwyn, at some point in time, you probably mentioned it a little bit. There's a question of scale. There's a question of scale up. Because if we're talking about economic growth, then we have to talk about scale up. Because as you know, I mean, the literature suggests that 70% or probably even more of startups will fail within the first 5 years, okay? So we're not gonna get economic growth if we don't focus on the scale up. We want a company, yes, you're a company now, and you start, and maybe you start with 5 employees, but maybe in the next 2 years or so you go to 20 employees and you go up. That's how you get economic growth, right? So it seems to me that some focus should also be on scaling up, because, I mean, you probably have existing businesses that at some point that can scale, but for some reason, we are not given the resources needed in order to push them along, right? So I think that we also need to start to focus on scale up, because more startups does not indicate that you're going to have successful businesses down the road. In fact, if you look across the regions, if you look across the innovative regions, there's not a correlation between more startups and more successful businesses. That doesn't really exist.
Yeah. In the interest of time, to answer your question, I think we have to look at, when we say startup, what we mean by that word. I think in the Caribbean, oftentimes it's a startup or mature, right? So startup includes companies that haven't reached 100, making tens of millions of dollars, you know what I'm saying? We still consider the company, like what Simon was talking about, a small business, right? That's one. Two, scale up, correct? When he talks about, like, even in terms of what 10 is doing, any of those things, they go from idea all the way through to very, very large business. And part of it is starting and getting the idea of business going, and then how do you scale? And this is where you talk about the internet. The internet allows you to get scale where I can be in Barbados, I can be in Florida, I can have a global business. Right? You don't need to have branches all around the world. I can use the internet to have the power of that. So yes, the answer is yes. But you need to first move the idea to business, make the business very successful, but then go to the next level of how do you scale, which is what like 10 of those environments offering.
And finally, our last question for the session.
Thank you. As the digital economy grows in the UK, there's a lot of focus on the talent pipeline. So schools, lots of initiatives around teaching young people to code, and universities faced with the challenge of how are we actually going to equip students and young people, not only with skills, but the attributes they need to thrive in this changing world of work. So I'm just wondering, are there similar sort of drives in Barbados, and what's the role of schools and universities in the ecosystems that you're trying to cultivate?
I'll start off by making a comment. Breaking news. So yesterday at the chamber lunch, the Prime Minister announced that the government is going to start an initiative around coding. Right? I think it's an initiative decided by the NGO, where they're going to have coding from primary schools and age groups going forward. So that is a phenomenal step forward, ridiculously phenomenal step forward. I'll also say that St. Kitts has instituted that, I think from the end of last year, where they have introduced coding as part of the curriculum in primary schools, and that's going through the whole of St. Kitts.
To answer your question as well, yes, I do think that there's a lot of work being done in Barbados. In fact, 10 Habitat is also working with some entities to do that. We'll be launching something pretty soon. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet. But also, we launched what we call a student immersion program, which is we take students, multidisciplinary teams, and we embed them into startups. And they work with those startups to understand how to build a business and how the rudiments of running a business works, so that when they leave school, they understand the concept of application and how to execute on ideas.
Okay, well, I would like to thank the panelists. One last question, online.
One question, Shannon Clark, question to the panel. As Selwyn mentions often with his work at 10 Habitat, entrepreneurs need more than just funding. They need an environment, but in our own current environment, we have a systematic issues such as slow legal process for small claims, low service standards, access to credit, and limited government facilitation in terms of business setup, incorporation, etc. Why are these still issues?
Well, I'm not sure the right person's on the panel to answer that, but really and truly, so part of being an entrepreneur is also about finding solutions to what seem like oftentimes insurmountable challenges. And entrepreneurs find ways to get around roadblocks. So yes, the speed of doing business in Barbados and to some extent in the region can be a disincentive. I have never seen that get in the way of an individual starting a company and pushing forward. So until that's fixed, I think you'll still see individuals being innovative and trying to work through those barriers to get their ideas out there and scale them.
I don't think there are any more questions. So I would like to thank the panelists for their insight in how to, using their entrepreneurship and how to use the internet to grow their business. We've learned today about competitive advantages, the philosophies about doing business, which are very, very important, e-commerce, the importance of investment, failure, growth, and thinking globally. These are all very key points that we must think about before starting a business and during the life of the business itself. Doing business in Barbados and the region is very difficult. There are many stumbling blocks which are still to be overcome, but we do know that in time, with all of our minds put together, we can overcome them. Now, in the beginning, I was supposed to have some introductory remarks from the panelists, but I skipped over that by accident. So I want to know if anybody would like to have any closing remarks. You can speak for a minute apiece if you have anything. Gentlemen, any closing remarks?
Yeah, okay. I think the net point, if we look at the topic, which is around how do we use the internet to grow economies and so forth. So I think a lot of focus was on understanding how to start a business and grow the business. What Mr. Cyrus said is very correct in that, okay, you start a business, you grow the business here in Barbados, but then this is where I can leverage the internet. The internet can serve two purposes. One, in terms of helping my business scale, because I can get access to talent from around the world. I can get access to resources, I get access to customers. But I can also look to say I can scale my business outside 300,000 people. There are 8 billion, 7 billion people around the world. I can sit and say, I want to run a business and have customers all around the world. But what I have to think about, it treated as a business that has growth here, customers here, but a business that's global, and how can I leverage the internet in a proper way to do that?
One of the things I would love to close on is this. Being a technologist is not being an entrepreneur. And we have got to start to incorporate the skills of entrepreneurship with technology and technologists to understand how to build or how to use technology and the internet to build successful ventures. What we find is that we'll teach people a lot about app development, and they'll build an app, and then they'll think it's a business. An app is not a business. You have to build a business around that app now. And so what we have to start to do is to look at ways to incorporate entrepreneurial skills with our young people that are learning technology and understand how to leverage that technology and the internet to create true economic growth.
Okay, for me, just going back to the beginning when we talk about the right ecosystem in place. And one of the things that Compete we want to do, as I said at the beginning, we don't actually look at startups per se, but we want to develop what we call technology extension services. So we want to look at companies who are already existing, and we want to develop assessors to come in and look at these companies and look to see what technology can be applied in order to increase scale and more so productivity and competitiveness. As you said in the beginning, Roger said in the beginning, at Compete, we follow economists more so than technologists. But when we compare Barbados and the rest of the Caribbean to the rules or the rest of small economies, in the 70s and the 80s, we were more advanced. And one of the reasons why now we are behind is not because we're doing less, is that we're doing the same things. So our total factor of productivity has reduced. And saying that is in terms of competitiveness and productivity. So what we want to do is pilot where we look at how can we get people to come into your business, assess you, give you, improve your business processes or your technology processes to increase sales and productivity and make you a bit more competitive in the region. So there's one way we're going to do it, and the opposite way is that we're going to actually pilot a technology and build the technology extension services around it, specifically, hopefully, in agriculture and agro-processing. So you could look out for that.
Okay, thanks again, panelists. Audience, did you enjoy the panel discussion this morning? Wonderful.